My grandfather's name was Edgar Davis, and everybody in here and there in Phoenix and around knew him by Ed Davis, and his wife was Classy Mae Davis. He moved his whole family from Phoenix, from Arkansas to Scottsdale, Arizona, where he lived on a ranch out there. He did a lot of ranch work from 1941 to 1946. In 1946, he moved to Okemah, which is in the South Phoenix area. When he got there, now he was already working for the family out in Scottsdale, which was called the Allgood family, and he owned a lot of cotton, a lot of hay, and grain, and my grandfather did all the work for him. And when he came to Okemah, he continued that. I guess Allgood must have knew other farmers, which contacted my grandfather to do contracting work for them. And I think some of the ones was from the Chandler area. And he contracted the cotton. He also did haul hay, grain, and bagged potatoes. And one of the other things he did was when it comes, during the cotton season, they chopped cotton. They had to weed cotton.
Okay. Now, when he was living in Okemah, and he was working as a contractor,
Mm-hmm.
Who were the people that he would hire? Who were some of the people that he would hire to bring out to work in the fields?
Yeah, he had several people that came up from Mexico. They just came up here and stayed during the cotton season, and they go back to Mexico. There was a couple of white families that lived in Okemah that went out. So they was intermixing, and we had people, like I said, people would drive to the fields in all races. They would drive out to pick cotton. So there was no problems as far as that goes. Everybody was poor, and they just worked together. That was about the way it went. When he got his son in it, his son was doing the same thing too, contracting cotton, hauling. So they both of them were doing the same thing.
Ed's son Tom worked with his father from the beginning, but later became an independent labor farm contractor, providing employment for the community as well. His work entailed chopping and picking cotton, potatoes, onions, and beets. He would also pick and haul hay, grains, and melons. Tom also took people out of state to harvest peaches in Palisade, Colorado, leaving around the 1st of June and returning around mid-September. Tom made trips to Wenatchee, Washington to harvest apples, beginning in late November and returning around the 1st of June. Tom's wife, Rebecca, prepared the meals for the workers, and Tom's niece, Ruth Adams, known as Sister, was her assistant. Tom's daughter, Juanita, also helped assist her mother with preparing the meals. Tom later took over his father's lawn business after Ed retired.
Well, most of the people that he had in Okemah were Okemah. Because the people there, were doing the segregation and stuff. He couldn't get jobs, so that's where he had all his people from Okemah, plus his family, and other little areas which not in Okemah, but surrounding areas, which is not that far. But that's where most of his people came from, right there in Okemah.
Do you remember some of the families that? Well,
we had, let's say, Jim, the Boozer families. We had a white family by the name of White. We had the Reeds, and these was all people in Okemah. Now, he had other people would come to the fields. They knew where, they would follow him in this. He'd have a truck. We put the people in the truck, and people would follow that truck out to the fields. And he had a lot of people, we never did know. And see, he didn't necessarily hire people. People just came because that was their living, picking cotton.
Okay. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Okemah, where it's located, and how it got started?
Well, Okemah really got started from. We had, I did the history on it. Now, people came from Okemah, Oklahoma. There's a place in Oklahoma named Okemah, and the people came from there that's doing the same thing. They was in search of cotton. And they moved to Okemah, but no, they hadn't named it yet. So enough people came, and somebody decided we need to name this community, and that was, they named it after this old chief in Okemah, Oklahoma. So they named it after him, and that's how it's got its name. But nobody really knew until I started doing the research on it. But that's how it's got its name. It's located actually between the Salt River on the north and 48th Street on the east, and South Mountains on the south, and 7th Avenue to the west. That was the area which was known then as the Bartlett Herd Ranch. That whole area was the ranch, but Okemah was just to the Salt River, to Roosevelt, to 48th Street. That was Okemah.
Now, when your grandfather Ed was working as a contractor, do you know how he would, establish contracts with different farmers?
Well, I think the only thing for us connected them that I can think of would probably be either Allgood's son, because I'm thinking he lived here in Chandler. And like I said, a lot of the farmers knew my granddad. And, if they had work out here, they would call him up at home. And they always had the connection somehow with them. And he would, I think majority of his work were here in Chandler, because I was out here with him all the time. And the Phoenix area, he didn't have a whole lot in the Phoenix area. Now, Scottsdale was when Allgood was planting cotton, so he was there too. And I can't remember which farmer was out here in Buckeye, Arizona, when he would go out there too. It could be some of the same farmers that was out here that had land out there that he did the same thing. But those were the two areas between Phoenix and Chandler. Yeah.
Where did your grandfather take people to work at? Like which areas?
Well, he would take them here. Like I said, if he had fields here in Chandler, he went to Chandler, Queen Creek. He even went as far as Buckeye, Arizona. But most of his work was mostly over here in the Chandler area and the Queen Creek area. He had a few fields in the Phoenix area also, because they had some fields that was close to Okemah, in that area. Occasionally, when I was real small, he went out. He contracted would take people out to Eloy. They picked cotton in Eloy, and they had cotton camps. He would pick up the people here, take them out there, and they would live in these little, live in those small houses out there during the cotton picking time. And then when that's over, then he bring them back.
Why don't you describe for us what it was like to pick cotton? Like what did that entail? Can you describe that?
Well, it mostly tell you it's just getting up early in the morning, going out there. It's in the early morning. It'd be cold, and you with your bare hands, them bows. You get your hands all chewed up because you're trying to pick the cotton. And sometimes it's wet. It's back-breaking work. You have to be bent over all the time. And if you're going to make any money, you had to really know what you're doing. You had to pick fast, have a long sack. And during my time, I couldn't stand a long sack, so I tied it up, make it short so I can fill it quicker. That's what I did. I never was a real cotton picker.
Now, when people were out working in the fields, if they had to use the bathroom or they wanted to take a break, how did that work?
Well, you didn't have the outhouses out there. You just had to go back down there in the unpicked areas and use the restroom back there. That was it. You didn't have any restrooms, nothing like that. Only thing that my grandfather provided was the water. They had plenty of water, but anything else, my grandmother, she provided the lunch. That was her job. She would have all the lunches, hot lunches for them. When she'd get out in the field about 10 o'clock and get ready for lunch. But no restrooms.
Do you remember what she would make for lunch?
Yeah, she would have mostly sandwiches, different kinds of sandwiches. She would make those. She would cook those her fried pies. That's what a lot of people like. She would make chili, and they had the cold drinks for them. And she would buy every once in a while. She would buy some fruit and bring out there, but mostly was sandwiches. She had what they called the pressed ham back then, and tuna sandwiches, and chicken sandwiches, tuna salad sandwiches. Those was about the main things she would bring out there, but everybody looked for the fried pies.
Now, so describe to me what the fried pie is.
Well, fried pie is you just make a round dough, and then you bake it, to brown it. Then you fill it with apples or whichever fruit you want to put in it, and you fold it over and mash it. And that's the fried pie. Where they fried, you have a little oil that they use, or oil or whatever they call it.
So instead of baking it, it would be fried.
Right. And everybody loved those fried pies.
That sounds good.
Yeah, well, they were.
Now, did the workers, did they buy lunch from her? Is that
Oh,
how
yeah.
it worked?
Yeah, they had to buy. She had a little, either 25 cents for a sandwich or something like that. And they was in lunchtime come. They'd come up to the, in the truck. She would be in the truck, or when later on he got a bus, and she would do all the stuff in the bus. People would come up and buy their lunch and either sit in the bus. A lot of time they just go sit underneath the trailer and eat lunch, or under the truck or something, because there was no shade out there. So that's where you had to eat, either under a truck or under the cotton trailer, or wherever. If sometime there's a tree around, or in a car or something like that.
When they're out working in the fields, do the women ever do different kinds of jobs than the men would do?
No, they did the same thing, men, except when they filled their sack up, they would, if there's a younger person there, she would pay him a quarter to take her sack to the scale, so she can weigh it and dump it in the trailer.
Because it would be pretty heavy by that time.
Oh yeah, so those women, they picked 200 and 300 pounds too. Because that was a living for them too. But that's the only difference is, you would just get somebody, and you have some women take their own bags up there. They don't want to pay that quarter, but they pick just as much as the men, just about.
Now, when I interviewed the farmer who was living in the house that's near Chandler Boulevard and Price Road, he mentioned that there was a young lady who was helping to pay the workers.
Okay, May Liza Williams. That's all she did. She would go through. My grandfather would weigh cotton and pay the workers until she got there. Because she always brought my grandmother out with the food and stuff. So once she gets there, then she takes over. She does the weighing, does the paying, and keep the books for my granddad. And that was it. And she did that, I think, up until he retired. And she lived in the Okemah community. As a matter of fact, about 4 or 5 houses down from him. So she did all of that work for him. Other than that's the only, as far as I know, the only somebody that I know. Most of the contractors, usually their wives always go out with them and do this kind of stuff, because he's always busy packing trailers, because he had to pack the trailer so he can get more cotton in it for him to make more money out of it.
Right.
But usually the wives, if they didn't have children, or older children, take care of the smaller children, she's always out there with them doing that kind of stuff, selling sandwiches and stuff.
Now, how long did your father work as a contractor for?
Well, like I said, he started out in 1946, when he moved to Okemah. He built his house there. And when he came there, he went from 1946 up until either toward the end of the 1959 or 58, probably in the 60s, that's when the cotton picking machine started. And I think that's about when it all really ended.
What do you remember most about your grandfather and your grandmother?
Well, those was my grandmother. That was my heart. I love that, because she she kind of raised me a little bit. When my parents went to Eloy to pick cotton, so I was going to school, so I stayed with my grandmother. You know, he was down there, but she was there, so I stayed with her. And she was just my heart. You know, nothing I wouldn't do for that little lady. And she was crazy about. She had 3 of us she was crazy about. And you know, and we stayed with her all the time. You know, I would go by there every morning going to school to get a biscuit. She would cook those biscuits. I would go by. And she would save me a fried pie when she come from the field. So she always did that for me. But that's, you know, I have real fond memories of both of them. You know, my granddad, when the cotton was done, he would cut yards. He was in the lawn business also. So I would cut grass with him, go out there on the weekend or after school or when holidays or when school's out. So he kept us busy. He didn't pay us much, but we just go out for the heck of it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was Grandpa.
Is there anything that you think that you learned from your grandfather?
Well, a lot work. I you know, if I'm doing something, I'm going to do it. You know, that was one thing about him. You know, he didn't run from any work. Whatever they wanted him to do, he did. And he didn't take no, you know, he get the people to come out there. If they come out to pick cotton, they're gonna come out to pick cotton. If they're not, you go home. So he was strict. You know, he didn't want them messing up because it looked bad for him. So, but that I learned from him. If you're gonna do a job, do it good. He fired me because I tore up the man's cotton. You know, I didn't know. I was trying to learn how to chop cotton, and I was chopping too much of the cotton down. So he just come out there and got me and said, "Give me that hoe. So you go up there in the wagon and help sell lunches." So I think that was the last time I went out and done chop cotton, and I've always done that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's Grandpa for me. Now, you know, I miss them both, too. I really do.